Okay, so starting Unit 3, we are gonna be talking about equations. So for 3-1, we're gonna kind of review what we've learned in the past. So we're gonna start with one-step equations and we'll work our way up from there. So when we solve one-step equations, we're just doing one operation. So whether that's adding, subtracting, multiplying, or dividing, we're doing one operation. And to do that, we want to do the opposite math functions to both sides of the equation. So both sides of the equal sign. If you come across a double negative means two negative signs are right next to each other. You'll see it like minus negative, like right here. And so a double negative creates a positive sign. And just like in English, if I said, I can't not do that, well, that basically means that I can do it. So those two negatives become a positive. Same thing here. Minus negative becomes -8 plus 9. -15 minus -6. -15 plus 6. 7 minus -2. 7 plus 2. So keep that in mind. And then your opposite math functions. If you ever see a number directly next to a letter, which is your variable, that means we're multiplying, okay? So the opposite of that would be to divide by 3.8. Same thing here, -5x. So we're multiplying -5 by something, by some number we don't know. So when we're solving an equation, to get rid of that -5, because we want to get the variable by itself, that's our whole goal in solving an equation, we would have to do the opposite, which would be to divide. This one got kind of screwed up on the copy, but it should look like this. So if you see something that looks like a fraction, it's division. So that's basically saying h divided by 8.2, some number divided by 8.2. And so the opposite would be to multiply. Same thing if you actually see the division sign. M divided by 6, so the opposite would be to multiply. 9 plus e, if we've got just a positive number in the front, there is no sign, but we know that that's a positive if there's not a sign in front of it. So the opposite would be to subtract, okay? This next one, b plus -1, subtract -1, you can do that. So it would be minus -1, which is, like we talked about up at the top, the same as +1. So either way, subtract -8 on the bottom one, because if I have h minus -8, what does that become? A plus sign. So subtracting 8 would be the opposite of it. And then 5.9 minus c, that should be negative. So we would add 5.9. So example 1, solve for x. So step 1, find the math function. So the math function we have in the problem, we're subtracting. So then we have x minus 7 equals -8. So we've got our variable number. So I can't move the 8 because there's nothing else on that side of the equal sign. I have to keep it balanced. I have to keep something on each side of the equal sign always. I can't move this x because there's no other variable on the other side of the equal sign for it to combine with. So I have to move that -7, and I'm going to do the opposite to do that. So the opposite of -7 would be +7. So -8 plus 7 is -1. Okay, example 2, solve for p. So we've got 7.5 equals -1.5 p, or -1.5 times p is what that's saying. So I have to get rid of everything but my variable. And so since it's multiplication in the problem, that's my math function, multiplication. So I'm going to do the opposite of that. So I'm going to divide by -1.5 on both sides of my equal sign. And we get -5. And you can always check your answer and plug it back in. -1.5 times -5 should equal 7.5. Example 3, solve for q. Negative 8.2 divided by q equals 20.5. So really these should be flopped. It should be q divided by negative 8.2 equals 20.5. But either way, the function is division. So that means the opposite function would be to multiply. So I'm going to multiply 8.2 to cancel it out on one side and to move it to the other side. So 20.5 times 8.2, and I get 168.1. So Q equals 168.1. Example 4, I've got negative 14 equals y minus negative 3. So minus negative turns into a plus sign. So I can rewrite the problem, negative 14 equals y plus 3. So now the math function is addition. And so the opposite of addition would be to subtract. So I'm going to subtract 3 from both sides. And then in your calculator, negative 14 minus 3, not minus negative 3, negative 14 minus 3 is negative 17. So y equals negative 17. So let's look at these on the bottom. Solve the following equations. So I've got negative 3.4x equals negative 31.28. Since this is multiplication, the opposite would be to divide. So I'm going to divide on both sides. So this one will give me 9.2. Next one, y minus negative 8.9. So that becomes y plus 8.9 equals negative 9.2. And so now the opposite of addition would be to subtract. So minus 8.9. And then in your calculator, the number that's on top, so the number that's already on that side of the equal sign, needs to go in your calculator first. So then we should get y equals negative 18.1. Third one, 5 equals 2.1 minus k. So I've got my variable, got my numbers. So I'm going to move this 2.1. There's no sign in front of it, so that just tells me that it's positive. So the opposite of that would be a negative or subtracting. So 5 minus 2.1 gives us 2.9, and I have negative k. So if negative k is a positive 2.1, if you ever have a negative variable, one thing you can do, you can just kind of shoot that negative or change your number. And so if negative k is positive 2.9, positive k is negative 2.9. If that confuses you, if you get stuck doing that, you can always imagine that there is a 1 in front of that k, an imaginary 1, or in this case a negative 1. And so then just like you would any other equation. So if you've got negative 1 times k, to solve it you would divide by negative 1. So then you know if you do it in a calculator, 2.9 divided by negative 1 is going to be negative 2.9. So either way you do it, if you put your imaginary 1, that works too. G divided by negative 1 equals 4. So I've got division in my problems. That means the opposite would be to multiply. It's probably confusing with the x. So times negative 1 times negative 1. So then G equals negative 4. Down at the bottom I've got this 9 is what I need to move, negative 9. So I'm going to do the opposite of the sign that's in front of it. So since it was negative, now I've just made it a positive. So negative 17.3 plus 9. So R equals negative 8.3.